Good afternoon, Mr. Terry Etam. Welcome back to the podcast. I appreciate your time.
Appreciate having me.
So this is the 6th time we've done this. I don't know if you're counting, but...
That's right. Yeah, I think you mentioned 5 last time. Yes. Yeah, that slipped my mind, but that's a good stat.
First time we did this was February 2020. So about 5 years later now, things have changed a little bit on the energy scene.
Yeah. That was a different time, wasn't it? COVID and peak anti-whatever.
Oh, yeah,
anti-oil and gas.
Right before COVID even too. But
I suppose it was. Yeah.
It was definitely anti-energy time.
Yes.
You're also one of the show's fan favorites. So I appreciate your time again coming back.
That's good to hear. Thank you.
Every time we do an episode, it's popular. So
good.
For anyone that is listening, you are the author of The End of Fossil Fuel Insanity, best-selling book. For a bit of context, and people can find your writing on BOEreport.com.
That's correct. Yep. And the book's on Amazon and Barnes & Noble in the US too. So, yep.
And you're still writing regularly.
I am. Yeah. Column every couple times a month. Probably should update my book. It's been 6 years now. It's hard to believe. And a lot's changed, but I went over that recently, and it seems like I'm fairly comfortable with the things we're dealt with at the time, but it could definitely use updating, I suppose. And it seemed like it was kind of written for a different era when, the industry's back was against the wall, sort of, and it was more defensive in a way, I suppose. But also, I would still do the same thing again in terms of just explaining the industry to lay people, which I think is still the biggest challenge.
Right.
Is trying to get people to understand it and why they should care.
And so, one of the reasons we're here today is to discuss some of the changes, one of which is the change in public sentiment towards pipelines, which is one of the main shifts that has happened recently. One of your latest articles was on that, I think. So why do you think sentiment's changing?
I think it's, I'm a pipeline, I'm not an advocate, but I think pipelines are just the most logical way to move around the fuel that we can't live without. So pipelines are just the best way to do it. So logically, that's kind of the sequence of it where I think it makes the most sense. Unfortunately, maybe people have adopted their enthusiasm for pipelines for the wrong reasons. It seems like it's more of a anti-Trump thing, or I don't know, the elbows up Canada thing brought a lot of people on side that otherwise wouldn't have been there. So I don't know whether to be happy because they're there for the wrong reasons or what,
Right.
but so I think it's a combination of a couple of things that maybe some of the anti-hydrocarbon hysteria has kind of died down somewhat as people have come to realize the way the world works. And then also just a realization that the U.S. kind of has Canada as a captive producer, I suppose, unless we have more pipelines to coasts. So I think people have kind of become aware of that if we want to diversify globally and trade with other partners who really want to trade with us, then that's what we kind of need to do. Yeah. So it's kind of heartening to see support across the country. Polls show support, I think, in the 70-some% range, almost across the country. So that's nice. But then comes the challenge of actually building something. So we'll see how that goes.
Separate issue.
Yeah.
Another point I think you made in your latest article, which people can read on the BOE report, is that the Russian invasion of Ukraine was another turning point, I think. The last few years, people have started to realize the importance of energy security, which maybe ties into pipelines.
It does, yeah, definitely indirectly. I think once the phrase energy security entered the lexicon, then it was more people just their thinking just kind of went along a different plane than it had been before, and that was the epicenter of that was Europe, which suffered. Ukraine suffered the most, obviously, but Europe suffered from a fuel perspective.
Is still suffering
the disruption of supplies, which they'd kind of built a lot of industry around. And so once that hit home, how what happens to a major German industrial town? I think I wrote about Ludwigshafen once, which is a huge industrial complex which produces pretty much anything you can think of, and it's a industrial city almost built around a gas pipeline. That was the industrial design of it. We can fuel all of these industries off of a centralized pipeline, and a lot of that came from Russia. And so when that's threatened with disruption, then all of a sudden a lot of light bulbs go on about, maybe natural gas is quite critical. And so I think that sort of emanated out, that it sort of impacted European thinking, and then that impacted other parts of the world. So I think, I think that was a real catalyst for and where do you want to get your energy from as well? Like who's a reliable partner, who's going to be there in the long run for any number of trading things. But energy is day by day, right? We need it. You can't stop pipelines for a day or everything stops. You can stop shipments of whatever for anything that comes by a ship or by rail or road or whatever. Usually there's some buffer in the supply chain, and there's a bit with gas and oil also. But things grind to halt pretty quickly. So
reliability and availability may be pretty high up there on the energy hierarchy of needs.
I think so. Yeah, and there was that mindset had been baked in. Is almost, I'm not sure that's the best phrase, but that oil and gas were going away, and so we don't really need this anymore. We don't need more investment. The International Energy Agency is coming out saying if we want to meet our global climate targets, there can be no new investment in oil and gas beyond 2021, which is, and a lot of people absorb that because it's the International Energy Agency, and not many public bodies or personalities or not one politician stood up to say, like, that doesn't make a lot of sense, even though everyone kind of knew that in the energy industry. And so that mindset kind of took hold of, like, well, we don't really need oil and gas anymore. So I think that was sort of a accepted truth in that 2019, 2020 timeframe. And absolutely no one other than like people like myself or Alex Epstein or other people that were, and we sound like defenders of fossil fuels, and not even necessarily that. It's just that's the energy we need to survive, and that's what works today. Maybe something better will come along tomorrow. I don't know, but for now, that's what keeps us all going. And so there's not very many of us that were willing to stand up and say that. So, not fun times. My first appearance here.
Yeah, well, I remember February 2020. Our episode title was $0 oil and why that is. And I think in your article you wrote there was only a few of us kooks who understood the realities of energy supply. And I remember after that episode, I maybe felt like a bit of a kook. We were talking about $0 oil.
Yeah, well, I didn't mean to call everyone kooks, but I think there's the people within the industry, and this is true of any industry. It's fascinating. You go talk to people in virtually any industry, and they have a specific expertise set that's really mind-boggling, that really opens your eyes when you just talk to them. It could be a trucker, it could be a farmer, it could be, you name it. I spoke at a surface land conference a couple of weeks ago or last week or something, and I was happened to be on the plane with a fellow that was going to the conference, and just struck up a conversation, and I learned more in an hour and a half about the surface land industry. And I've been in the business a very long time. I've dealt with surface land people for a long time, but he had worked outside of the oil and gas industry for some time. And he explained to me the impact on various other industries of what they do and how critical it is. And actually, I feel kind of like a ignorant kook myself after that, because I realize now like that's kind of a central industry or occupation, I guess, to a lot of infrastructure getting built. It's like, and I've been doing some research since then, and I'm writing an article about like the California high-speed rail fiasco, how it just turned into like a green cheerleading thing into like a near impossibility. And a lot of it hinges on surface rights issues. And like, I hadn't really thought of it in those terms. So we just keep learning all the time. And so people every occupation, like I said, has their own specialty, and you can learn from them. And I think energy professionals were no different. Yeah. And I'm probably no different than a lot of them. Like a lot of people, and I've harped about this before, that people in the industry tend to have the opinion that everyone will figure this out. It's logical. That there's no way that people can believe these things, but they can if they're fed narratives and stories that go unchecked, and emotional stories versus reality. And so, and it's a sad thing that was kind of true, that we will have to wait till a point comes where people learn the hard way. And nobody wanted to see that, but it just seemed inevitable. Like there's no way you can explain to people why you can't live without natural gas. And it's the same goes for any utility, right? Or sewage or whatever. Like people take it for granted. They take the heat in their building for granted. They take their heating ducts for granted. You don't think of those things. They're there. They work, whatever. And so till you're faced with it, possibly doing without, had a hard time, then the lights start going on. So.
And the point is that maybe we weren't such kooks talking about energy in the 2020 and $0 oil, and there's some realities that come with reliable energy. They're
absolutely, and it's when something is so reliable that it's there all the time, you discount it. You don't place value on it. You don't. We see that with groceries all the time, right? You just go there and everything is there. You go to a modern supermarket, and if something is not there once, then it's like enormously upsetting, like toilet paper and COVID, right? It's like there's 1,000 things in a grocery store that we use all the time, or 100, whatever the number is. And they're there all the time, always. And if one goes missing, then we're like, what's going on here? Why are there no apples? Or why is there no toilet paper? This is ridiculous. And those are like simple things. Well, toilet paper isn't that simple. You don't want to live without it. But the bigger building blocks like energy or heat or fuel to move your vehicle or electricity or whatever, there are places in the world that live routinely with power outages. Here, they're just like very inconveniencing and annoying, and people get quite upset. Whereas other parts of the world, it's a regular thing. So it's we just get jaded when we have everything all the time. So
another example you gave was the heat pump problems that are occurring in the Eastern Canada right now. So maybe for the listener, that's an example of failed energy policy. What is a heat pump maybe, and why is it failing?
So a heat pump is a great idea. It's like a heat exchanger, and it's an electrically driven device, and it operates off of heat differentials. And so it can, in winter, it can heat your building, your house, and in summer it can cool it within a certain band. They're not super effective at super low temperatures or super high temperatures, but they can cool your house by a certain number of degrees, and they can heat it by a certain number of degrees, and they work well at that. And because they're electric and they don't burn wood. A lot of people in the Maritimes have wood burning or oil burning furnaces or fireplaces, and so that's bad for emissions. And the governments there didn't want natural gas either, so they were steering everyone towards heat pumps. And the example I wrote about was the CBC actually had some stories on it. So they encouraged many, many people to get heat pumps, and then I'm not sure if the adoption rates weren't high enough, but they started giving them away to anyone under a certain income level. And it wasn't a trivial income level. It was like a household income of $130,000. If you made less than that, which is a lot of households in the Maritimes, I think it's like 2/3 of them or something, you qualify for a free heat pump, which is like a $10,000 or $20,000 item. So they put all these heat pumps in, and people were like, yeah, my heating oil bill went down or whatever. Now my electricity bill went up a little bit, but it's great. And they still had to supplement it with wood because it does get too cold. But the problem that arose, which people hadn't foreseen because they didn't pay enough attention to energy realities, was that then an electrical system has to provide power for the peak. It has to be there, reliable, with dead certainty at the peak, which might only be once a year, it might be once a month, but that's when you need it, and you need full capacity, and you need it there. There can be peak shaving or whatever, but it still has to meet that peak. And that's a challenge with renewables too. Like people think that the more you get, the more it helps the system, and it offsets cost of and burning of some hydrocarbons, but it can't supplant everything because it won't be there at the peak. And so what all these heat pumps were doing was they're pushing that peak higher and higher and higher, because when does everyone need them the most? It's when it's the coldest. So when Prince Edward Island was like the kind of little clear-cut example, being an island, that helps too. But they mentioned that before 2025, they had once surpassed their peak heating or their peak electrical capability. I think it was like 390 megawatts or something. And then from January to April of 2025, they'd exceeded it 6 times. And that wasn't even with record low temperatures, but that was just in cold snaps. And so the utilities were saying, this can't go on. Like we're making the problem much, much worse with these heat pumps because that peak is now getting higher and higher and higher.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, our ability to provide power is diminishing because they were going more towards renewables. And there's still people out there saying that the answer is more wind turbines, which is absolutely incorrect because you don't know that they will produce. Yeah. They probably won't produce when it's minus 25, which is when they set their peak there. So, so this is an example of just policy that had just charged down a path, and it got so far because Mother Nature allowed it. Mm-hmm. And then once reality set in, they realized, wow, we have a big problem here. Yeah. And this is happening with electrical grids all over the place. Like you can increase solar and you can increase wind, and everybody's happy and they think that it's a victory until real trouble comes, and the investment to maintain the baseload power has gone away because it's been chased out by the cheap power that, and wind and solar do provide very cheap power mm-hmm. under their operating conditions. Mm-hmm. But is it really beneficial to have near free power for 23 hours and then you freeze to death in the 24th hour? Yeah. Which is what happens if you let these things unfold.
Right.
So
no redundancy, no reliability, and actually costs are going up at the end of the day. So the
system-wide costs go up. And then that's another hard truth that people don't like to hear is that if you build a system that is largely wind and solar, mm-hmm. now you're paying for two systems. Mm-hmm. The capital cost is for two systems. And proponents will point to the lower operating costs when they're operating, that they do push power prices down, but mm-hmm. that's looking at the trees and not the forest. The forest is, you now have to pay for two systems.
Yep.
So
doesn't make sense.
Not really, no.
The example I've been given is it's kind of like driving your car, where if you hammer on the accelerator, you're always maxing out every 5 minutes or so. Your ultimately fuel efficiency is not nearly as good as if you just keep a nice steady pace. Kind of like the energy system, where you need redundancy and stability so that ultimately prices are better for consumers.
Right.
Which isn't happening.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And another car analogy is that if you're driving down the highway at 100 kilometers an hour, your car might be, depending on its aerodynamics, it might be using 10 horsepower, 15 horsepower, 20 horsepower, mm-hmm. but you need far more of that in your car. You can't say I only need a 20 horsepower car, mm-hmm. but that's what you need to do one task, but it needs to do many other tasks, including getting up to that speed. So you need a lot more power as well. Right. So you can't say that that's adequate mm-hmm. power for your vehicle, even though that'll get you anywhere at the speed limit.
Mm-hmm. So these things are maybe helping shift the public perception on energy projects and the need for them. But another point I've been reading about is some of the numbers that come out of energy agencies, like maybe the IEA, that are not always accurate. How influential do you think some of those reporting numbers are on the broader policy decisions that get made? When I think I read one where they were predicting natural gas demand is going to fall 10, 20 years from now. They influence capital centers like on the coast and whatnot. Do you think that organizations like that are really kind of detrimental to the energy policies?
I think they are, especially from a policy perspective. I think there's people in the energy industry, or I'm not sure you call it the energy space, but have always looked at those numbers and they're a little bit suspect, or they like, well, I don't trust that. And the International Energy Agency, the IEA, like their oil demand forecasts, you can see when they forecast out 10 years, this tends to happen. They'll forecast in year one, it's here. And then next year they raise a forecast and they raise a forecast, and then reality comes in up here. Yeah. And that's consistent. They're like that.
Revising it.
Yeah. And so I think the people on the energy production side, from a global perspective, even right up to Saudi Aramco and the big U.S. companies and the global players, they all absorbed that and they took it with a grain of salt, and no one believed it. No one acted on it with any conviction. And you can see that in 2021 when they said there should be no more oil and gas investment. Mm-hmm. And people kept right on investing without a beat. No one changed any course of action except policymakers.
Exactly.
Because you're talking about the Mark Carneys of the world, the global decision makers that look to academia in a sense and say, this is a scientific organization, for want of a better word, but it's full of analysts. It's full of well-educated people who are using analysis with a lot of data at their fingertips, and they're and the part where it gets murky is that they were marching in lockstep with what policymakers wanted to see happen. So when you have the world's biggest or most powerful politicians come out and say, we will be net zero 2050, right, or as Europe did, or Canada did, or Australia, or the Biden administration commit to, like, this is a steady one-way path and we're not turning back. Like, this is what we will do. And then they turned to the IEA and said, we want to make sure that your messaging is aligned with the policies that we say we are putting in place. Some people absorb government dictates as just gospel, right? And in some sense they are. Some of them are. Like if a government says we're going to do something, they don't carry out their promises, but if they threaten something, they can quite often do it. Like they can raise taxes, or they give themselves raises, or whatever. There's some, but some people just have faith in government policy when they get elected and they say they're going to do something, especially when it's believed to be a moral imperative, like fighting climate change. A lot of people rally around that and they say that's the truth, and that's what matters. And the policymakers could go to the IEA and say, this is what's happening. Like, we are going net zero 2050. So we want what you say and do to align with that reality. Right. And I think that's what happened. And there was a lot of pressure on the IEA to conform their messaging around that. And there was a fairly abrupt shift. I've read the IEA's global or annual energy outlook since, 2008. And it was much more. People have always faulted their forecasts, but you can fault anyone's forecast, right? They're something 10 or 20 years out. It's a hard thing to do. But there was a definite shift in the way that they viewed the world around that time, 2017, 18, 19, 20. Right. And so, but the policymakers that once you stake your claim or you build your reputation on something, you don't go backwards on that. You don't recant everything. Politicians don't anyway. You see that in UK right now, right? They're just digging a hole deeper and deeper for themselves, and they double down. They'll relax it just a fraction, or the EU in general, where all of their automakers are saying, we're going to go bankrupt if you insist on having this internal combustion engine ban and enforcing this EV crossover. We still have it in Canada, which has been relaxed a little bit, but they're just flat out saying, like, if you think you've seen industrial decline before, you just wait. And then now they're relaxing it just a little bit, but they don't come out and say, like, oh, this is like, this was not good. This is bad policy. Like, they just don't do that. So, so I think it's been incredibly destructive. But I don't think you could single out somebody like the IEA, even though they're publishing a bunch of garbage, because it was part of that whole circular mindset that it's, and then the cancel culture became a part of it too, right? And it was like a very powerful web of stamping out dissent and like the very obnoxious phrase climate change denier, climate denier, whatever you call it. Like, that's just insanely disgusting to link that to the Holocaust. But that's what they did because it's a powerful emotive tool, and that's what they wanted. They wanted emotions. They wanted people to be angry that we were still burning oil, and they didn't want people to be rational. They wanted them to be raging and fighting, and they cheered when Greta cried at the UN and lectured everyone and how dare you and all that. That's what that was not a logical argument. There's no logical analysis of the difficulties of converting an infrastructure system. It was like, we're going to do it because the government said, and then if you run counter to that, then you will be canceled from the discourse.
Yeah. And the problem is that a lot of those IEAs, not that the IEA is evil or anything, but they influenced capital providers on the big cities. Do you think that also trickled down into industry, that because of some of these mentalities that investment is slowed and made it difficult?
Absolutely. It has really, and it wasn't subtle. Like, it was brute force. Like Mark Carney and Mike Bloomberg were instrumental in the GFANZ, Global Financial Alliance for Net Zero, and they signed up capital providers and insurers, which is even more dangerous. They got them to declare that they were going to move away from financing fossil fuels,
right.
And so that's and they convinced university endowments to sell, divest fossil fuels, and so there was very, very dampening on the investment climate, and the investment. So the money wasn't there, and then just the will to even try and build anything was.
Yeah.
Why would you do that? Even if there were how many academics and energy commentators were talking about stranded assets in the Pembina Institutes of the world and the think tanks that were like, you can't put money into oil and gas assets. It's stranded money. It's dead money. And it's like, we're sorry, all you people that have worked so hard to build these assets, but they're going to be worthless in 20 years. And that was just the only narrative that was acceptable.
Yep.
That was the information flow. And so, it dampened everything. And Canada's still paying the price to this day, right? We're still mired in that mindset to some extent. Like, and you see people that we're entering this very weird time now where people, a majority of people support pipelines, but then when it actually comes to building them, then it's 1,000 roadblocks come up, and I don't know that anything will get built, but and for a lot of reasons, and not all of them are bad or insidious. Even it's just the way the world we live in now. So.
And it's not that we're against the environment and that people who advocate for traditional energy and reliable energy are anti-environment.
Exactly.
Like, I ski every weekend, I go hiking every weekend, but there's a reality to the situation that.
Absolutely. The geologists are among the most ardent environmentalists I know. Like, they know more about the environment, and they care about the environment, and they drill wells. And it's anybody that looks at the energy sector, like, earnestly and seriously and in depth, you come to the conclusion very rapidly that we consume record amounts of oil, we consume record amounts of natural gas and coal and wood. We all of these things we just consume more and more and more of, and wind and solar, add those in too. And I don't know about nuclear is not at a peak probably, but as there was a couple billion people on Earth, and a very, very, very small fraction of those lived well. And now there's 8 billion people on Earth, and 1 billion of those live very well. And there's 2, 3, 4, 5 billion that are aiming to join that club. And that's going to mean just more and more and more energy. And the infrastructure system that's been built over the past century, it's just insanely hard to think about changing that. And logistically, like, pipelines that have been built, like, think of the gas distribution system that feeds 60 million US homes, or I'm not even sure how many Canadian homes. Like, how do you change that? You could never build it, right? You could never, in this day and age, to get the permits and the right of ways and everything to actually imagine just building out that system to connect every home in Calgary with natural gas, and Edmonton and Winnipeg and Toronto and Vancouver. And it's so to think that you can just change this is, and even within a 10 or 20 year time frame, it's just not a realistic thing to contemplate as being a project. It's so it's there. And that sounds, and I'm hoping that we're entering an arena where you can actually have these discussions and say, yes, we'll integrate wind and we'll integrate solar and electric vehicles, because in some arenas they just make perfect sense. In Arizona, where the air conditioning demand creates the power peak and the sun is at its hottest, like, that's a natural solar haven. You can't paint a better picture for the demand for solar power. You still need a solution for when the sun goes down and it's still hot. So you have to think through that too. It's not that easy. But electric vehicles, like in the city as a urban runabout, they're perfect. Or a delivery vehicle that does 30 kilometers a day and it comes back every day, and or something that you can charge. Like they're venues where these things are perfect. And let's integrate them there, and where they work and where they don't, we'll use something else. And nuclear will come along someday. And so I think that's the positive side, is maybe we're getting there, but it's been so damaging. And and the idea that we're going to build a lot of new infrastructure, I think, is just a non-starter. And I'm working on an article for that. But just the entrenched, and it's not necessarily negative entrenchment. It's like, if you take the Endangered Species Act, like that's something that's very relevant, and I think deserves a lot of respect. If a species is known to be in population difficulty and its habitat is dwindling or whatever, we should respect that. We should do something about that. And I think most people agree with that. Most nature lovers think that we should not render something extinct when we can do something about it. But there's consequences to that, right? And when you have all this patchwork of ruffled grouse and burrowing owls and this swift fox or whatever, and this kind of hawk, we've brought up generations of biologists that have worked very hard to prove that this is the case, that these things deserve or are worthy of protection, and this is how we do it. This is the kind of habitat they need. You kind of have to respect that knowledge, which we didn't have when we built the railways, right? Or the Alaska Highway or something. We, like, if you think what happened then, it was just like, how do we make this happen across the country? You can't do that these days.
It's built into regulations now.
That's right.
Maybe a little too much, but the point is, it's not the environment versus, energy.
And that's right. It's if anything, it's humanity versus the environment. And we have to, 8 billion people is a lot of people. And everybody wants to go on a holiday. Everybody that lives here likes to go hiking in the mountains or whatever, or go to the Caribbean for a holiday or on a cruise ship or whatever. And we have an impact. And how do you manage that? How do you deal with that? And our demand for everything, for food, for materials, fuel, it has an impact. So,
and it's also kind of ironic, or I don't know what you call it, sad, but the turning away from fuels like natural gas, which has a high energy output, and dampening their use, and maybe even traditional oil, is actually increased emissions in some places where people don't have those energy resources. They resort to burning wood, which is a huge CO2 output. Or coal.
And all sorts of particulate matter, and that's one ironic consequence of getting people to go on heat pumps, is like the heat pump works great to -10, but then I have a wood burning fireplace for everything after that. And it's true, maybe they don't use it as much, but they still use it. Like, that's their backup plan. So if you take the sum of those emissions on an average winter, the reduced emissions from the heat pump, all of that's just pushed back onto the electrical system, and there's no guarantee there either. But you may not be any better ahead, or you might be worse off when people are doing that. So especially when reliability is at stake. So and at the end of the day, reliability is, people will have many beliefs and they'll profess to want many things, but if their reliability and their safety is at stake, everything else takes a back seat, and that's just humanity. That's the way. That's being a human. It's
another unfortunate consequences of backwards energy policy is the less investment. So things aren't getting built, pipelines and whatnot, but the reality is pipelines generate billions of dollars in capital investments and royalties and taxes, which help pay for everyday services that people aren't getting in Canada as a result.
Yeah, they do. And they move the product and you don't even know it's there. Like pipelines are incredibly reliable, and there's millions of barrels a day moving down hundreds of thousands of miles of pipe in North America. It's under people's feet a lot of times. They have no idea it's there. And as long as they're safely maintained, like anything else, they're not dangerous. And you do see there's exceptions to everything, right? You don't ban automobiles because there's car accidents, and you shouldn't ban pipelines because there's a pipeline spill. It's just something went wrong and something can be fixed. It's not an inherently dangerous thing like skydiving where that's just dangerous.
Yeah.
But even then, proponents would argue that you can make it very, very safe, but the things happen. But it's not, a pipeline is less risky than moving things by truck or rail car or any other means. And there's just no other way to move millions of barrels a day of product or billions of cubic feet of natural gas. There's just no way to do that otherwise.
Energy needs are one thing, but the result of having pipelines is also just a benefit for people all over the country. I put together a few stats on every $1 billion in pipeline related royalties and taxes, and the numbers I found were about 12,000 worker shifts at $80,000 a year average salary, 10,000 teacher salaries for a year, 500 kilometers of road maintenance. So there's that's for every $1 billion pipeline related royalty.
Wow.
So
those are cool stats.
That just gives you a sense of, and the TMX is $30-40 billion.
And construction costs. Yeah.
So you get a sense of just how much these things can contribute to the economy.
Oh, absolutely. And the value of that product going down there every day, like Trans Mountain or TMX, I think, I can't remember, it's combined, is like over 800,000 barrels a day. And at $100 a barrel oil, that's, what's that?
Massive royalty.
Yeah, that's right. The royalties and the value of that product that allows everything to happen at the other end, not just for us, but the world, and the royalties. And the occupations. And that's a Canada-wide benefit, not just through transfer payment, but if you go to the Maritimes or Saskatchewan or somewhere else and you meet people that work out west or have worked out west, and they a lot of money gets sent back home, because some of these energy sector jobs pay very well. And that was really noticeable at the peak of the oil sands boom, where there are like a lot of Newfoundlanders that would fly in. And CNRL, Canadian Natural Resources, had their own plane that would shuttle workers back and forth. And so that plane was full of money when it went home, and it supported a lot of communities, and it did a lot of good back there too, right? So it spread far, the benefits of it.
The invasion of Ukraine and the talks of annexing Canada are a couple of reasons why maybe the subject is back on the table in Canada, but it also seems like the green hysteria is kind of fading in general, where, Greta is not necessarily eco warrior anymore. Why do you think that is? It seems to be just the green hysteria is fading in general a little bit.
Yeah, it was a flame out. It just had, they tried, the people behind that movement tried to use it for too many things. They tried to, it became like social justice, environmental justice. These are actually real terms in the lexicon now. And so they tried to fight racism and gender inequality and all of these things with the climate club. Right. And so they used it all over the place. And they blame proponents of, they blame the craziest things on climate change. Like anything that happens is climate change. Like they're like sharks becoming right-handed is climate change. And that's one of the more ridiculous examples. And any weather event now, like weather is extremes. Like no one talks about the weather on an average day, but anybody can think back through their life and there was an exceptionally cold winter or a hot summer or a wet summer. Right. Farmers can tell you this. They recite every year and they're all different. But now if it's a rainy spell, that's climate change. And they came up with names like an atmospheric river, which is like this ludicrous term for a phenomenon that's been around forever, or weather bomb cyclones. It's a cyclone that's always been a cyclone, but these names that, and people just, eventually they tune that out. It's the boy who cried wolf, right? It's just, at some point, people get tired of being harangued for driving a vehicle or going on holidays. And that was there were movements, there were people organized groups to try to get a mass declaration where people would sign off that they would not fly anymore because it's bad for the environment. And a lot of a core group the movement signed on to that, and they're like, we have 50,000 signatories that swear they'll never fly again. We try and get your average citizen to sign off on that, and they're like, all right, I've had enough.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same thing with the weather, just like and people. I don't think it was the objective, but it was the consequence, was that people were made to feel guilty for driving around anywhere. Like, it's like, you don't have an EV, like, so you hate the environment. So you don't care about your grandchildren's future. Really? That was the linear thinking of that movement, because that's what they published everywhere. Right. That's just, and the proponents would say that, like, I'm doing this for our grandkids' future. I'm fighting whatever. The Liberal government, you said all the time, Gerald Butts, is for our grandchildren's future. Yeah. It's like, so the obvious statement they're making is that if you don't do what I do or say, you don't care about it. So it's like, hey, if you don't care about your grandkids, like, wow, look at that guy. Yeah. That's what they tried to instill in the consciousness, that level of animosity. Yep. And I reached out to numerous groups on the West Coast that would BC environmental law or something or whatever. And they're like these hyper aggressive firms that were suing hydrocarbon companies and whatever. And I would say, like, you have no chance of winning. You might win your little skirmish, but you won't win the war. If you want to do something constructive, why don't you be collaborative and just recognize reality? And they would either refuse to respond, or they would respond to something snarky that along the lines of what I'm just saying, like, you don't care about the environment, you don't care about your grandchildren's future, or whatever. Just tunnel vision and unable to think clearly about the issue, clouded by moral righteousness. I think that, and that got tied into politics, where just like it's all tied together. There's a hatred of business and a hatred of capitalism and a hatred of fossil fuels. And it's just like, all of this stuff is just bad news. And so there's a political mindset that just thinks that's all, we trust nothing that they say. Their motives are all rotten, and they only care about their own self-interest. And and I don't know how you ever reconcile that with it. And the example I always use is, if someone starts a business and they, let's say you become wildly successful and you employ 1,000 people and you become a billionaire. You can look at that two ways. It's a success story that you created 1,000 jobs, or someone will look at the same thing and say, you only got rich off the backs of 1,000 employees because you couldn't have done it without 1,000 employees, which is true. But the fact, and I'm in the camp that you created 1,000 jobs and you got rich along the way. Like, you created a lot of value. And I think that's a good thing for society. And other people think that it's a horrible thing that you did that. So those two mindsets are kind of form a basis for the success, or especially that one narrative or mindset creates a bedrock for all of these arguments about oil is killing us. That's how they come to believe that, even though it's demonstrably false. So,
another way that's been explained to me is that a lot of the well-intentioned thinking from the environmental policies is that comes from this perspective that the earth was perfect before humans came along, and this perfect environment that we are ruining slowly. But in fact, it wasn't so perfect, and we are battling nature always, and the environment and Mother Nature are pretty harsh.
Oh, they're trying to kill you every second of every day.
Yes.
So they end everything. They tear down everything. Like, nothing withstands the ocean, and the sun will beat your house to death if you don't paint it right. It's like, nature is very harsh. Animals will eat you. That's how it goes. Cold will kill you. So we built up defenses against that and we've been so successful at it that that there's billions of us now. So it's a lot of people, you're right, their motives were pure, and a lot of people just want to do right, and they were just like told that this is right.
Well, and there is a perspective. I mean, you do need to take care of the environment too.
Absolutely,
I agree. Like, that's fine.
That's environmentalism to me. Is like, and for me, it's primarily taking care of the habitat, making sure that there is a lot of wild space, that there's that you don't destroy things unnecessarily, that you replant trees, that you reclaim sites, that all of this should be done. When you're done with something, it should be given back to nature. Nature will take it anyways, but it's, but we should replant things if we rip a bunch of trees out, or we should plant more trees anyways. I think that's the number one thing that I think should happen, is that, it really floors me that we don't do more of that there's so many spaces that could be all trees, and those form ecosystems which attract wildlife, and right from bugs to squirrels to birds to everything. Like, that's environmentalism to me, is like, let's do more of that.
Well, if you're really worried about carbon capture too, trees are a natural.
So more trees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good way to do it. But unfortunately, I guess green narratives get confused. And what really is unfortunate is that the economy in Canada suffers, and things like roads and schools and whatnot. And the state of the economy is in a poor shape as it is. So we have this great natural resource that we can take advantage of, and we're not doing that right now.
That's right. And that's part of that whole parcel of what happened, though. Like, it's not hard to find academic studies, especially from that era, that would say that a green economy, a net zero economy, will actually be better, a stronger, more powerful, more fruitful economy than a hydrocarbon-based one. And they have all sorts of ways that they come to that conclusion. One of them, the biggest one, is call it the social cost of carbon, they call it, where they say the carbon in the atmosphere creates all of this mayhem and destroys things and kills people and causes storms which destroy buildings. And so they calculate all of that. They never calculate the benefits of hydrocarbons, which are everything. The fact that we have houses is because of hydrocarbons. So, but they never looked at that part. And so that you can do a lot of, once it's something that creeps in and it becomes the basis for further analysis then. And that's part of the problem in academia, is that when something becomes established, it has a toehold that humans are causing climate change, and is causing mega storms and more hurricanes. Okay, now that you know that that's true, what are the consequences of more hurricanes? It's like, I can do that. So if there's more hurricanes, that means Florida's going to get wiped out. I've had people tell me that Florida won't last another 50 years. They literally believe that the state will be gone in 50 years. And so if you believe that, then you can do a study citing this other study that Florida's real estate is going to get wiped out at a cost of $40 trillion or whatever it is, because you take each dwelling times its market value. And now here's some new, so now here's the cost of not doing anything. It's like, are you sure that's the cost of not doing anything? And are you sure that's the cost of climate change? Or is it the cost of building 1 million homes right along the water?
Well, it's a complex system. And at the end of the day, it's a complex system. You're right that you change a variable by a little, which is one reason I'm not worked up. Like, a lot of people, I hear that too. Like, how can you not be alarmed by these projections? It's like, well, I do models at work, and I know what happens if you tweak a variable by a tiny little amount. One example I gave was a oil and gas company that had something like $100 million in abandonment liabilities. And the financial accounting regulations, when you do audited financials, they say, in order to calculate that amount for your books, you inflate it by the rate of inflation, that amount, to come to final terminal value, and then you discount it by your cost of capital amount, and you get a number that comes on there. And this one company that I was looking at, their value of their ultimate abandonment liability went from $100 million to $60 million because U.S. government changed their interest rates, which is like, it's just an absurdity. And that's a financial thing. And you look at that, you go, well, that's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. But that's what happens when you tweak a long-term rate by a little bit. So when you do a climate model that's going out 40 or 50 years, and you change something by 1/10 of a degree, and you say that that's going to impact crop production by 3% a year, like, that's a very big consequence. And so just the fact that it's over a long period. And so any one of those things, and they're all in flux. No one knows exactly what happens if the temperature does change. If it's getting greener, that's been proven. The globe is getting greener. So what does that mean? Does it mean more cloud cover or less cloud cover? And what does cloud cover have to do with the rate of change of
temperature? Does it help it or hinder it? Does it create cooler conditions, which cools the earth, or does it trap more heat? And to what anyway, it's just endlessly variable and complex. And so these projections which are just like, we're all going to die in 30 years because of this model or of 10 models, which are all built on the same reasoning. Like I don't know. It's just not something to get worked up.
Yeah. But to say that the last 3 or 4 years has been almost like you're going against suicidal. The church.
Oh, it is. Yeah. And people come out of the woodwork. I get letters from so many people that are retired and say, now that I'm not working anymore, I can say this, from professors, a lot of professors and people at work. They're just like cowed into silence. Like, you just can't say things.
Yeah. To question
you just can't. It's
crazy.
The narrative or the dogma or whatever, or the policy. It's, and it took a lot of effort to get that built, that structure built so airtight. They did a really good job. Like, if you say something, you'll be excommunicated and shunned. And most people are just like, I have other stuff to do. I'm not even going to worry about that. So
life's too short. Almost.
Life's too short. Yeah. You would see that relentlessly in polls, right? Then an election comes up, and what are the things on Canadians' minds or Americans or whatever? And it's like climate change is way down the list. And for a lot of people, it's probably just a reflex thing because it's on a list or something. Yeah. But most people have much bigger worries than that. And that never really caught on. And I think, getting back to your earlier question, I think at some point people are just like, I'm going on a holiday and I don't care. So,
amongst things like energy security, when another country invades neighbor, and then you can't get reliable energy anymore, then maybe that also wakes people up too.
It does, yeah. Well, anything that impacts reliability, where U.S. states that suffer brownouts or blackouts or the tropical or the Uri, that big winter storm in Texas a few years ago, where things froze up, and that's just like a shock treatment for at least that jurisdiction, but usually a lot more. And it's, there's been a lot of near misses, and I feel very sad that one day there will be a direct hit.
There will be a problem one day.
Yeah. And it could be really ugly, like a power outage in Chicago or Montreal or Toronto in the middle of winter of a cold snap, when everything is at its most fragile anyways, when you just like pray that everything doesn't break.
What's almost happened in Alberta, I mean, in the last couple of years, there have been days where everyone has to ration.
The warnings. Like, how does that happen in the most energy-rich jurisdiction in the world? It's just,
So why do you think that is? Why do you think we've had that problem?
Well, I think that's just this grid problem and whoever listens to grid people talk about the grid. Like, you want to talk about something that can get tuned out instantly.
It's pretty dry.
It's pretty dry. Worse than pipelines.
But it's important.
It's important, but it's ubiquitous, right? I know where my power comes from. It comes from right there. Like that's, a lot of people don't think beyond that, right?
The wall.
The wall. And it's always there. It's in that outlet. I know it's there.
Yeah.
And they're just like, what do you mean it's not there? Or so that's just because of this reliability that we've had. This narrative we've been talking about is that we need more wind, we need more solar, we need more renewables, and it's good for everything. And a grid operator that has to balance the stuff. And now they're being forced to balance periods of extremely low prices, like on a sunny, windy day when the price of power is zero for an extended period. That, like, you can look at that in the most simplistic terms and think that is good news, but it is not good news, because that the rest of the grid needs to be functioning all the time. And if you look at how advanced, and people still cheer when they say, like, oh yeah, look at solar provided 37% of the power in California. And California is like a poster child for how bad their power and energy system is. And that's just going to get worse, but people flag that as a good thing. And that still gets some traction. And so, and that's just a fundamental trait of humanity too. If you go up to the average person on the street and say, would you rather get your electricity and your power from the wind and the sun? which are renewable and clean and don't hurt anything. Would you rather have that or dirty oil? Like, what are they going to say? And if you say to them, like, so which do you support? Then they go, well, that sounds good. I'll support the clean stuff. Like, who wouldn't?
Right.
Because people don't think about the whole chain of it. So this is encroached more and more and more. And then as demand goes up, then at some point there's a record, and you can get away with it for a very long time. Well, months anyways.
Yeah.
Or maybe even years until you hit a weather challenge, and then all hell breaks loose. That's when everybody can die, right? And so that's and there are jurisdictions where this has almost happened. There was I think it was Maryland about 4 or 5 years ago, where they had there was so much demand for natural gas that it depressurized their system, and they had to halt deliveries to 7,000 homes on one of the coldest nights of the year.
Yeah.
And the governor came on and said, like, people will die tonight if you don't seek shelter, and you take people into your house, and churches took people in, and it was that close to a catastrophe. And that story is scrubbed off the web. You can't find any mention of it anymore. But that's as close to a catastrophe I've ever seen happen. And it's just not like, just no one wants to talk about that, right? So that's part of the problem too, is like, don't talk about that. That's just bad for business. So we get close to these things, and we just like sweep it under the rug until one day we can't. And Uri in Texas, that big storm, was close to that. And then people blamed natural gas because some natural gas plants went down, or some plants froze up or something. But it's the gas that was remaining is what kept the system alive. And they learned a lesson that they have to winterize everything better than they had. So, but the moral of that story isn't that you have to get rid of natural gas. Like, that's just absurd. But some people came to that conclusion. They said, see, it's just as unreliable as wind and solar, but which is not true at all, because if you have a natural gas system, you can winterize it, but you can't make the wind blow when it's minus whatever. So,
not to mention Alberta, where we have almost unlimited natural gas, but we still have nights when it's minus 30 where we have to conserve energy. That seems crazy.
Well, yeah, and everything lines up against that side of the supply equation on like an extreme cold. The sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow, and batteries don't work well. They don't accept charge and they don't hold charge. And even in heat, batteries don't work as well. Solar panels lose efficiency beyond 78 degrees Fahrenheit, I think, or something like that. So in temperature extremes, these things fail. They perform their worst when they're needed the most. And so even putting a bunch of batteries in isn't going to help you. It could help you for a few hours, but then you have a false sense of security, because what if you need them for 10 hours? So you could spend a fortune and put in 8 hours worth of batteries, hundreds of billions of dollars, and think, well, look at that, we solved the problem. And then you have a 2-day cold snap, and then everybody dies after 10 hours and 4 minutes when everything goes out. That's why systems are important. The infrastructure is important. And we've come this far as society because we have this web of redundancy, and on the power side, on the gas side, if somebody's power system goes down, we can pull from a neighboring province or the US. Their grids are interconnected. There's gas redundancy, just like you have redundancy in roads. You don't rely on one road or if you can avoid it, right? So
it's engineering 101.
Yeah.
But so why do you think we've got to that spot in Alberta, even where we have nights that people have to conserve? Like, I think that ties into your latest article on the natural gas stuff. Why?
Yeah, I'm not really sure why Alberta has gotten down this path. I think it's policy decisions, and I'm not sure if it has to do with intermittency. Our market doesn't seem to function that well. And it's a deregulated market, but it's an odd market. Like my most recent article was about how it's actually difficult to get natural gas in Alberta. And it's policy related as well, right? Like, because the carbon tax is in the mix on everything, the industrial carbon tax. So would you build a power plant in Alberta that burns natural gas if you're going to have to pay? So natural gas might be $2 a gigajoule.
It's almost free.
Or it was free.
Yeah.
It was negative a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
But the long-term price is very reasonable for natural gas. You could lock in forward prices for 3, 4, or 5 years at
Right.
$3 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But if the carbon tax at $90 a ton is something like $4 a gigajoule, so that more than doubles the cost of gas, and that's slated to go to $170 a ton, which is 9 something a gigajoule.
Mm-hmm.
So layer that onto the market price of gas. If you call it $3 plus $9 carbon tax, now you have $12 a gigajoule gas. That's as expensive as Europe or Asia or somebody that's relying on LNG. Like no one wants to build infrastructure that operates on $12 a gigajoule gas, a power plant or anything. Like it's just you can't do you'd need an insane power price to make that profitable, because you have to recoup that through the value of the power. So I think that's one of the biggest reasons, is that's been like a stick in the spokes of grid development, is this paralysis caused by industrial carbon taxes. So there other jurisdictions haven't faced it, because like if they rely on hydro or nuclear, that's more stable and that's impervious to carbon taxes, greenish.
So-called
dams
green.
aren't green.
Yeah, not green at all.
Yeah, not green at all. But they've been labeled that. But so they get away with that, and they are stable. They're hydro is subject to water flows, but generally that's fairly stable in Canada. So, there are big parts of Canada which have that as their primary electrical supply, and so that's stable. Alberta is more gas. It was coal, and we switched from coal to gas, which was a huge thing in itself. Like that was massive, and we did it quickly. So we went from coal to gas as a primary driver, and now then the carbon tax gets layered on, which quadruples the cost of the input fuel. And power is a margin game. You have to be able to make enough money to operate a plant. You can't afford to have a fuel cost like that. So I think that's anybody that not anybody. The data center thing is like kind of knocking on Alberta's door to see who's home and what's here. But that there's in the middle, there's producers which have lots of gas, and then there's a demand for gas, and then in the middle there's a bunch of this bad policy which is totally unsettled. Like nobody knows which way it's going to go. What's Carney going to do with the industrial carbon tax, and what's Smith going to do with the carbon tax? She's drawn a line in the sand. She's saying that $90 a ton is an acceptable kind of level. And I'm not sure that a lot of industry would agree with that. Again, like I said, that's $4 a gigajoule. And then for people, and I've talked to somebody that was looking to build a big project in Alberta saying like, well, that's some certainty. You must be happy with that, right? And this big project is predicated on generating carbon credits. And the representative from the company said, like, that doesn't do us any good whatsoever, because Carney isn't necessarily going to accept that. We don't know. Like Carney might still want it to go to $170 a ton. Companies don't vote, remember? So people vote, so we have to get rid of the consumer carbon tax. But companies don't vote, so that's optional. So let's see which way the political wind blows. And let's see if we can attract enough. If Canada could attract a bunch of investment, irrespective of the carbon tax, if it stayed in place, then they would, without a doubt, I think that they would leave it in place, which would create more calamity for Alberta and for anybody else. It depends what kind of investment is coming in, but I can't see that happening. I can't see investment coming to Canada, especially when the U.S. is going the opposite direction, right? So U.S. is slashing those costs and those impediments, and those they still have the same environmental pressures we do, as far as like localized habitats and endangered species and whatnot, but they're cutting a lot of that red tape. And Canada we say we want to, but 6-8 months ago when the trade thing blew up, everyone was talking about this problem of interprovincial trade barriers, the different standards, and there's like just this universal recognition that this is just bad. We have to fix this, and what's been done to fix that since? Like I haven't seen. I don't pay attention to the news much, but I haven't seen or heard of any breakthroughs in anything other than maybe like trades being recognized in 2 provinces or something. But it's the countless challenges still remain. And they might look small and ridiculous, like the standard for some sort of whatever. But there's a whole body of people that have built it in one province, and a whole body of people that have built it in another province, and you're going to ask one of them to step down and abdicate their position. So each one is a potential battle. So that's another reason for thinking stuff won't get built.
Do you think if we kept at least 1 or 2 coal plants in Alberta, we would maybe be worried about really cold nights?
Well, coal is just another form of base load. So I think if we had more natural gas, redundancy would be essentially the same thing.
Okay.
Coal is just another form of fuel, but you as long as you're feeding the fuel to it, it'll keep going, just like natural gas. So, and we do have, like, natural gas is like so ubiquitous in the province.
Right. So
we could, if it depends what the priority is, right? Like if the government says we want to build that baseload power so that to guarantee we never have these shortages, it could happen.
It's crazy.
And I think the Alberta government is walking this tightrope. Like even Danielle Smith was talking about net zero 2050 for the longest time. I don't know if she still talks about it, but it's like, we're going to meet that and we're going to be, net zero, and we're going to do all of these green things, and we're going to push all of these agendas forward at the same time. And it's just like, it's same problem with the systemic thinking. It's just like, you haven't really thought through. And I haven't thought it through either. I can't understand, and I don't know anybody that can, but you have to make the effort to say, what happens if we do this? What are the consequences? And then there's the camp that we talked about earlier. They'll say, well, the consequence of doing nothing is that the climate goes up 4 degrees and we all die.
The world ends.
Yeah. So that's one camp. And then, so that's a theoretical maybe, and you can believe it or not. And then, but what happens if we neglect our grid? Well, then we all die in 5 years instead of with much greater certainty than in 50 years. If you can't meet everybody's power demands on the coldest night of the year, it will be a catastrophe one day. And I don't think that's alarmism. That's fairly standard observation. If people's power goes out, if you electrify everything or as much as you can, and then get people relying on power, and there's a power outage, that's just catastrophic. Homes freeze, pipes freeze, everything. And if you can't supply enough power, like I said, there will be peak shaving, and there will be companies that will be paid or forced to turn off their operations. So in that sense, that would mitigate any catastrophe. If every department store is forced to let their buildings go cold, to conserve industrial fuel, but that's going to have its own problems, right? So, because they're not made to freeze. So, that's the worst part of the worst outcome. But at the same time, maybe that's the catalyst that has to happen somewhere, where there's something big and shocking that happens, where people can't deny that anymore. And I hate to use that word even, but it's like at some point the evidence will be so convincing that this will be like, we have to deal with this first. This is the priority. This is the must-haves, and these are the nice-to-haves.
Right. Unfortunately, we are self-inflicting wounds on ourselves. Canada is basically the size of a U.S. state in terms of emissions.
We
think we make, unfortunately, Canada doesn't make a difference in the global scheme of things. No matter what we do, even if we shut down the entire energy sector, it wouldn't change a thing.
1.6% of global emissions or something. Yeah, and it just goes somewhere else. It's like we're an exporting nation, so if we don't export our goods, the world needs them. They'll get them from somewhere else, right? It's not that they'll just live without what Canada has. They'll just get it from somewhere else. And so, just offshoring emissions is just a bad idea too. Like Germany or Europe hollowing out their industrial base and saying, "Oh, we cut our emissions." You're consuming exactly what you always did, but you just buy it from China or Russia. Instead of producing it yourself. Like no one's better off. You're worse off because you've lost control of your destiny. So there's these national emissions targets. If that is your basis upon which you build policy, you're going to come to like these crazy things like, well, we'll shut down our steel mills because they consume a lot of or they emit a lot of CO2. Are you really helping yourself? You're winning according to that one benchmark, but you're losing everything else. So it's, and the previous federal government clearly didn't understand that. I don't think they're
No.
so, and I think a lot of people have more confidence that Carney does, and I think he kind of does, but at the same time, he's gone a long ways down that road about he's as strong a green, a climate warrior as there is anywhere, and he's probably more powerful than almost any, or what he's done has had a bigger impact than almost anyone because he went for the very top global levers and he tried to move them.
Yeah.
So for him to turn his back on all of that and be pragmatic about energy, like I don't see it, but
yeah,
I don't know.
In the case of Germany, they cut out their a lot of their emissions, but they continue to buy natural gas from Russia. So they're funding a war in Ukraine because of their crazy energy policies.
Yeah. It's just completely irrational. It's just
So they're paying for Russia to invade Ukraine, and they leave themselves vulnerable due to their emissions framework.
Yeah, and it's their policy brain is so addled that there was even a plan to bring Russian gas into, I think, Azerbaijan, and then reroute it to Europe, and then they could call it Azeri gas, I think it was. Okay. And then everybody's like, okay, well, we're good with that because it's not from Russia. It's like, you can fool yourselves and your population that easily. Mm-hmm. Like that was like such a good example to me of how demented their thought process have become on energy and emissions. That is like a possible route of to satisfy what we need to do. Yep. It's insane, but that marching down that path that they have, the net zero mantra and mentality, will box you into a corner where you have to do insane things like that. Yep. I don't think that's avoidable.
Not to mention Canada, where we import a lot of oil from the Middle East, like Saudi Arabia and Venezuela, I think even. So, like, where's your... I mean, if you're supposedly caring about the environment, where does that fit into the whole?
Well, yeah, I wrote about that 10 years ago. And at the time, people were arguing that, dirty Canadian oil, we're better off to import from somewhere else rather than build a pipeline for our dirty oil out east. And it's arguable whether all refiners can even use it, but a lot of them could.
Yeah.
And it's just a good Canadian policy that you're becoming self-sufficient and you're capturing value at home, and it's. There's a lot of reasons to do it for sure. And what's the true environmental footprint of that oil, even if it's not oil sands oil, like to ship it across the ocean and all of what's the footprint of Saudi Arabia? It's in total. It's the accounting got very twisted there for all of these things.
Still is.
It still is. Yeah.
In Canada today.
Yeah. And then it just gets tied into there's so many levels where this is a challenge. Like even if you were to convince people of that argument, then that it makes sense to get Canadian oil out east to use in southern Ontario and Quebec and the Maritimes and feed the Irving refinery in New Brunswick. Then how do you convince Quebec to allow a pipeline across Ontario, or how do you build it? Or it's just such a. And then you get back into all of these hurdles about where's it going to go and who's going to allow it and what about this municipality. And anyways, it's just So anyways.
Federal government claims that their goal is emissions. Maybe they should look at Canadian oil.
Yeah.
That would help.
Yeah. It's I think that's still one of those things that they cannot say, that it's, they'll say when everybody got upset about the U.S. talking about, one person talking about annexing Canada, then people all of a sudden said, pipelines to the coast are a great idea. Yeah, we support them. But again, not thinking through, do you really support it? Like now you see BC pushing back instantly, or EB, again, or whatever his name is, pushing back against the pipeline, and probably successfully. Yeah, because he has many reasons to object to it and many tools to object to it. And even the federal government has said, well, you can't convince them, like, then you don't have a project. So they're immediately stepping back from their pledge to build nation building projects, right? It's the first challenge they get, they just turtle and say, I guess that's not going to happen after all. So,
right.
So what's a nation building project that everyone's going to agree on? Like, name one.
Right.
Like,
there are some examples of like LNG on the West Coast. There are some green shoots, and it's not all bad.
No, that's right. There's some good things happening, and I think we just need a different mindset about utilizing the infrastructure we have and the right of ways that we have. And it's like you're right, that Coastal GasLink new line was constructed through BC, and I don't mean to be too hard on BC. It's but they're kind of no different than a lot of places. But so there's the Trans Mountain right of way. There's the Coastal GasLink right of way, and there are ways to do these things and work with groups and make them happen. And we are getting LNG built. It's late, but it's coming, and there's multiple projects. And my hope would be that this would cause a rethink of like what could we do in Canada that's more of it. Like maybe we don't have to transport all that oil to the coast. Why don't we make stuff here? Like a friend of mine insists that we should have like a 10 square mile industrial zone around our petrochemical plants, which have nothing but 3D printers, where we make everything that the world needs from car parts to you name it, anything you can make with a 3D printer, which is a lot. And we have everything right there. And then all we need to do is ship the finished product out, which is like much higher value anyways. When you rather ship a box car full of worth $10 million worth of stuff than oil worth like $150,000. Like it just makes a lot more sense. 10 million is an exaggeration, but you could add a lot of value to a lot of stuff in a single car versus oil. So why don't we align ourselves that way? Why don't we focus on that? But these are like policy asks, right? And it's I don't know. You just hope for somebody in politics to come in and say like, can we just rethink things? Like, can we just like not start from scratch, but just people can hate Trump all they want, but and Putin and or even China, their leaders, they understand what they have for tools. It's like, this is what we have. This is what we don't have. How do we maximize what we have? And a lot of countries do that, right? There are a lot of countries that have no access to their own native oil and gas. So it's like they're exposed without energy. So what do we do about that? What do we build an LNG import terminal, or we build a coal plant or whatever, and then they utilize what they have. If they have a big workforce, then they make clothing or whatever, or they assemble things, or and Canada has all of these things. It's like, how can we best utilize these? And can people just like park the ideological manias and just say like, Canada's blessed with all of these things. What's the best way to use them either in-house or to create, and it's not, you can see what the world needs, right? Like the world desperately needs rare earth minerals and rare earth minerals processing. So what are we doing to make that happen other than talk? Money talks. And what did our previous government do? They gave $10 billion to build a battery plant in Southern Ontario, which is like, now they're already walking away from it, the proponents.
Right.
And it was just a dumb idea anyways, because we will never compete with China in battery manufacturing. They're ahead technologically, and they're just cheaper, and they have a whole architecture that built to manufacture things. Manufacturing is super easy in China because they built all of the state has built all of these components or encourage their development. And why can't we just take a page from that book and let's encourage our development? Like, why can't we start minerals processing here? And the world would beat a path to our door if we have all of these things and we can deliver them. But you don't even hear that on anybody's radar. It's like we might open some mines if we can get our ducks in a row. But that's just opening a mine to send it somewhere else in the world to process. So why isn't that $10 billion going towards a concrete plan to say, here in this box in Northern Ontario or wherever, or Manitoba or where this stuff is, why don't we build a nuclear reactor up there to power it and then have our own little ecosystem. These are the things that would be nice to see, but
my perspective is things will have to get bad. Like the budget deficit this year is $100 billion or something, and Canada is going broke. So eventually, I think it will turn around because it has to, because we're broke.
Yeah. We'll. Yeah. I think we'll have to change directions. You're right, because we have no choice.
Yeah.
Debt ties your hands, unfortunately. Debt kills, right? It's like it takes away your flexibility, and you're owned by someone, whoever loaned you the money, and you have to deal with that, and you have to pay interest on it, which eats a big chunk of your budget up. And so that debt is a bad thing, but we are where we are. You're right. So it's that's a very good point you make. I think you're too young, but back in the 80s, I think, when John Chrétien and Paul Martin
we were broke then too.
We were broke then too. And there was a famous incident where back then, when a government borrowed money, they would issue bonds, and they would go to like an actual, it's almost like a physical auction of bonds. And our finance team, our federal finance team, went to New York to issue a bunch of bonds, and no one would loan Canada any money, saying, "You guys are in such bad shape, we will not buy your bonds." And that was like a turning point for Canada. Like, we can't borrow any more money. Like, and they put in a bunch of unpopular policies, the 6 and 5 inflation or interest rate thing. I can't remember. They got inflation down. They did really harsh things, harsh medicine, to get government spending under control, and just to run the country more fiscally responsible. And we don't have that now, right? It's just like a let her rip. Yeah. We just keep going and going and going. And if there's one thing that's shocked me, and I don't mean to sound too negative, because we haven't seen anything yet, so it's hard to be negative about an absence of things. But when Carney came in, there was some hope, at least. Okay, at least this guy understands economics, and at least he has some sort of a financial head on his shoulders. But now he's running up the debt, just like even worse, at a faster rate than before. Yeah. And I know some of that's because tariffs have been forced on us that we didn't see coming necessarily, but how do you roll with that? What do you do? We're starting to talk, let's build pipelines. But then the first sign of resistance, then it's like, oh, I guess we won't build pipelines. Right. And so they talk like they understand it. We need to develop the Ring of Fire minerals and mineral belt. That's great. Where are we at on that file?
We should do it.
Yeah. And it's not even just the feds. Like Alberta, I was talking to somebody in the federal or the provincial government recently about the mature asset strategy. Like Alberta has this big problem with mature assets that are, these low natural gas prices are driving companies out of business and causing perfectly good gas fields to be headed for abandonment because they're uneconomic. The amount of gas they produce doesn't cover property taxes and the compression costs to get into the mainstream pipeline. So the government knows this, and they're working on a strategy called the mature asset strategy to find a better market for that gas without having to increase it to high pressures and put it on the big pipelines. Can we develop like an intra-Alberta market for this gas and attract business? And so they know this, and they've been working on it for over a year. Nothing's happened. Like it's a public document. The mature asset strategy is a great document. But what's happening? And I know it's easier said than done. I'm not in politics, but they ran and they're leading. And it's like, where's the motion?
And that's a pro-energy government too.
Oh, it's a pro-energy government. Yeah. So, and maybe there's very good reasons, but we don't know what they are. Like, we don't hear anything, right? It's just what's going on behind the scenes. What's going on behind the scenes with carbon taxes, which are, we're never going to attract capital to Canada. That border might as well be a wall. Yeah. As long as we have this industrial carbon tax.
Yeah. Uncertainty.
Yeah. The uncertainty. And then if they go for certainty with Trudeau's old scheme, then everybody will know we will stay away from Canada forever.
Right. Yeah.
But as long as there's uncertainty, they'll think, well, we might go to Canada. Depends where this sort settles out. So
next time we go to sell bonds and nobody buys them, maybe interest will start to pick up in the energy sector when they realize that we have a great resource that can be developed and
it's
pay the bills.
It's so sad, but that's it's like national unity, or you can polarization. I don't know how political polarization. I don't know how that gets resolved unless a country becomes in such a crisis that everybody pulls together and they forget that they're supposed to hate each other.
Yep.
It's going to be the same in the U.S. Like the only thing that's going to pull something together is something very threatening happening. So it's just sad, but let's hope that the threats don't materialize, but are enough to get everybody galvanized.
Well, we're in October 2025. Getting back to the article that sparked this discussion, there are some changes in public opinion, it seems, on pipelines. So sounds like you're a bit more optimistic.
Yeah, that's right. And it's easy to get pessimistic, but we have a lot to be optimistic for. First of all, we live in like an abundantly blessed country.
Yeah,
we have
it's true.
In Alberta, but in Western Canada, but also in the whole country, we have a entrepreneurial mindset, and we're a hardy people, right? We live here in a tough climate, and we can do a lot. Mm-hmm. And there's so many great entrepreneurs around that can do so much, and you see it there's smaller ecosystems. Like people are doing amazing things that with AI and with new technology and energy developments and various. Keep pushing the border or the boundary further on things like battery storage is getting better, and electric vehicles are getting better and more niche-y and more useful, and like electric hand tools are great, right? So there's progress being made all over the place, and I think if we could just like do something about that bigger wet blanket on things, I think there's a lot of room for optimism. Like we could. We have everything we need here, and it can be, we can leverage it and make it much, much better. So I hope we get there. So
not to mention our energy producers have become so efficient at finding hydrocarbons and also managing capital. They're handing out record amounts of capital back to shareholders now, and the business.
The dividends are huge, and you're right. They're very good at what they do. They're efficient at extracting it, and we take that for granted. I mean, in some sectors, we just grumble about the cheap natural gas price, but what a blessing that is. Like you can heat your home for next to nothing on the gas cost, right? So if an average home burns 20 gigajoules in winter and gas is $2, that's $40 to heat a home for a month in winter. Like that is like the rest of the world is envious of that. So
exactly.
So we have so many things to be thankful for here. And we have people that can get us to the next level. And maybe we just have to ask our politicians to think more and think more strategically and try not to get, I don't know. I'm not a politician. I can't walk a mile in their shoes because I don't do that, but I hope they try.
help us help you.
Yeah, that's right.
I really appreciate your time today.
Thanks for number 6 here.
That was a great update. Yeah. I think that's a good place to leave it.
Excellent. Okay. Until next time.